Hello everyone! Today I'd like to talk with you about the 1965 sci-fi horror film Planet of the Vampires. This film is also known by its original Italian title, here we go, Terrore nello Spazio, translation Terror in Space, or you might see it referred to as the Demon Planet. Set in the future, naturally, the crews of two spaceships, the Argos and the Galliot, are attempting to respond to a strange signal indicative of life on the supposedly uninhabited planet Ara when the ships are pulled down to the surface. The crew of the Argos find themselves battling an invisible entity with the power to take over an unconscious or willing mind and use the body for its own purpose, even causing the dead to rise and attack the surviving crewmates. I first came to know of this movie in a roundabout way. I learned how it was made several months before I saw it. Robert Skotak discusses it in one chapter of his biography of writer-director Ib Melchior, who wrote the story and the English-language screenplay for Planet of the Vampires, adapted from a story called One Night of 21 Hours by Renato Pestriniero. The information the book provided made the film sound very interesting, and I wanted to see it, but being me, I decided to wait a while so that the plot details would fade somewhat from my memory and the movie could surprise me. Which totally worked, by the way. It was you guys who brought the film back to my immediate attention in May when I reviewed 1958's It, The Terror from Beyond Space. I mentioned that film's similarities to Ridley Scott's Alien, which prompted several of you to comment that this film was also an influence. Some of you were more assertive than others on that point, but I didn't say that It, The Terror from Beyond Space was the only influence on Alien. Planet of the Vampires was directed by Mario Bava, the Italian filmmaker with a reputation for low-budget but distinctive horror films. A couple of you might remember that a couple years ago I did a mini review of Caltiki, the Immortal Monster, or Caltiki il Mostro Immortale. That was one of his earlier works from 1959. Bava took an eager interest in all aspects of the development of this film, from beginning to end, particularly its special effects and cinematography, which he didn't necessarily give himself credit for. This was an American International Pictures film, and it was largely an Italian production, but with an American star, Barry Sullivan, and co-starring a Brazilian, Norma Bengal, and a Spaniard, Angel Aranda. My mom couldn't get over how strange it was to see Barry Sullivan in a role like this, in a movie like this. I really enjoyed his performance here, though. His captain is responsive and dependable, and I liked his presence. Boop! Editing Weaselberry here. I filmed this video a month ago. Since then, I've come up with some additional comments, so if you don't mind, I'm just gonna interrupt myself a couple times here. I wasn't that familiar with Barry Sullivan, having only seen him in one or two films in supporting roles, and by the way, there isn't anything specific my mom associates him with, I asked. So I did a little YouTubing, and that led me to 5 episodes of the game show Password, on which Barry Sullivan appeared as a guest for 1 week in 1966, alongside Carolyn Jones, also known as Morticia Addams. This was a ton of fun. I got really into it, into watching it, and into playing along at home, as they say. And hey, Godzilla even came up in one round. So I thought I'd take the opportunity to share that recommendation too. Now back to Planet of the Vampires. I didn't go into this movie with the highest of expectations. I thought it might be a standard, lower-budget space monster movie with all the bells and whistles that typify that genre in that time. And I did encounter some of those elements, but I also found more than that. There's something distinct about the visuals and sounds of Planet of the Vampires. Those costumes, for one thing, which were designed by Gabrielle Mayer, are striking with the high, restrictive collars. They actually remind me of a stereotypical vampire Halloween costume. It's a layered outfit, cloth underneath, with a leather-like plastic covering it in sections, sort of like armor. We see alternate uniforms at one point, a completely different design, more like retro tracksuits or ski suits, and not nearly as attention-grabbing as the black getup with the neon piping. I also appreciate that clunky metallic noise you hear whenever anyone runs through the ship. And when they're walking around outside, there's a pleasant boot crunch, and I do like a good crunchy shoe sound effect. The volcanic planet's surface appears barren and rocky, but also colorful and diverse. Dangerous, too, with terrain that's difficult to navigate. The characters have to watch out for geological hazards, not just the unseen thing that's trying to get them. The film's also sporting some creative in-camera visual effects and photography tricks. In particular, I like the optical illusions by which actors are incorporated into a shot so that they appear to be dwarfed by their surroundings, be they the planetary landscape or the inner bowels of another ship. The set design is really something. The ship's interior is relatively plain, utilitarian, industrial, but look at how spacious it is. It's almost comical how wide open it is compared to some contemporaneous bridge designs where crew and equipment are practically on top of each other. Perhaps this was just the result of budgetary constraints, but I find it actually helps distinguish the overall production. Sometimes a low budget can work in a movie's favor. There's a pervasive, heavy atmosphere on the dark but colorful planet Aura, characterized by fog, tons of fog, and a howling wind that sometimes sounds like an air raid siren. These elements are complemented with a subtle but effective score, composed by Gino Maranuzzi Jr. It's made up of a lot of sound effects and tones, suggestive of something electronic, but perhaps also something that could be organic. And there is a more traditional thematic component to some scenes, but this music is kept to the background, contributing to the mood, but never taking center stage. All of this generates a feeling of drawn-out tension, and it has its creepy moments, like the dead rising, with some nice slow motion that doesn't look too much like slow motion, stretching out the suspense as the tomb opens up. Note the unusual coffin and grave marker design. That was an Ib Melchior contribution, and apparently, my mom pointed this out, the ships were carrying all these heavy-duty grave-sealing materials with them, almost like they were expecting to have to bury a lot of bodies. A couple other good moments include a sequence in which you're waiting for a character to discover that a dead guy is not in fact dead, and a certain quick reveal of an injury. It looks fake if you freeze frame it, which is why I'm not showing a picture, that and it's kind of a spoiler, but in a quick flash, it's startling. One of the making-of stories in Skotak's book told how Mario Bava had wanted to include a scene in which one of the ladies presents herself to the captain in her birthday suit. Melchior and Hayward thought that was insane and convinced him to let the idea go, and I'm glad they did. A, I'm not really on board with people randomly taking off all their clothes in the middle of a movie, and B, it just wouldn't make sense here. I don't object to a flirty or romantic tangent if it works in context and eventually enriches the story, but you can't just toss sex or nudity into your movie without rhyme or reason. Anyway, I like things just fine the way they are. No distracting and irresponsible hanky-panky, just a seasoned commander who has a friendly but professional rapport with his subordinates, the men and the women alike. Now, there are a few narrative connections between Planet of the Vampires and Alien, as I said, and the biggest similarity has to do with a fantastic sequence in which the leads discover another older ship on the planet. Just outside lie the bones of a giant humanoid, and another skeleton is preserved inside some sort of room. Screenwriter Dan O'Bannon later admitted that the space jockey scene in Alien was inspired by this, as had been long suspected. By the way, I've never understood where the term space jockey comes from. If I remember correctly, it's not used in the film itself, so everybody calls it that. Who coined that, though? Hang on, I can look this up myself. Okay, multiple sources indicate that the space jockey nickname for the dead alien pilot in The Derelict was introduced during production. One source says it first appeared in a line spoken by Tom Skerritt's character Dallas in a script rewrite, though the revision was taken out and the term never shows up in the final film, as I thought. The description stuck, and it can be seen on the storyboard and on promotional material. Now, it could just be a spin on the term desk jockey, which came into use in the 60s and was itself a colloquial derivative of the word jockey. However, it most likely was first coined by Robert Heinlein, who used it as a title for a short story published in 1947. I've wondered about this for years, and now I know. And now you know! It's an eerie find, these two decayed corpses of an unknown intelligent species, one that apparently died in the process of recording a final log in its strange, unearthly voice. We see a lot of advanced technology in this film. The ancient alien civilization ran their giant ship on a power construct that makes no sense to the humans, but the humans themselves have their own collection of gadgets and gizmos, including a so-called meteor rejector and a wristband communicator with a camera and viewing screen. It's like they're using Zoom on an Apple Watch decades before either of those things were invented. And there are laser guns too, of course, although, interestingly, we only see them used once. Laser guns, blasters, I don't know. The part where things changed from, hey, this is pretty good, to this is great, for me, though, was the ending. I won't spoil it, but it has a dark twist that's like the perfect way to wrap things up. I definitely recommend Planet of the Vampires, provided you're going to be able to look past the fact that the dialogue, the audio, and the actors' mouths don't always match up. Seldom match up, I should say. Each actor was speaking his or her native language, so if you're watching it in English, most of the actors are dubbed. It's not a distracting dub, though, and I've seen some distracting dubs. I went through the movie a second time to get all these images, and as I did that, I kept noticing additional little details that I could include in this review, so the movie definitely holds up to repeat viewings. It's not perfect, but in general, I was very pleasantly surprised. It's an engaging film with some amazing visuals. Pretty good stuff for what they had to work with. I hope you enjoyed this review. Check out Planet of the Vampires if you've never seen it and it sounds like something you might enjoy. And if you have seen it, I'd love to hear what you think of it in the comments below. So please go ahead and share your thoughts there. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye!